Just a few items here from research and the news. You can see a few of these taglines that say, experts say the new normal in 2025 will be far more tech driven. Not everybody can access, communicate, or learn using technology. And if we take a quick look at the world in terms of the top 10 countries with the worst telecom, we see that there's a lot of African and Asian countries, one North American country. Top 10 best countries are in Europe and Asia. And if we look at the top US cities with poor telecommunications, even in the US, we see, people that don't have access to good telecommunications resources. These are households with no telecom. 59% of the households in FAR, Texas, do not have access. And you can see the list: Texas and some in California, Indiana, Louisiana. So, according to the data from the US Census Bureau, well, this is from 2019, 30% of households in large and medium-sized US cities still lack wireless and broadband connections. What are the causes of these things? Poverty, illiteracy, linguistic exclusion, lack of relevant content, of course, cybersecurity. So who's helping to bridge this gap? And there is a number of organizations that are working on this every day, both internationally and nationally here in the US. Educational institutions depend on telecommunications. So teaching and learning, student services, and it really changes how we communicate and teach students and how they learn. And why is telecommunications important? So aside from the pandemic, it really does promote collaboration, cooperative learning. It's inclusive of some students that don't do well in on-campus or in-person environments. It really brings them in. And as we look at newer generations of students that are attending educational institutions, we can see that they come from environments where they are heavily dependent on technology. So it's good for educational institutions to really, understand the impacts on how they deliver teaching, learning, and student services. There is telecommunications support for education out there. We have a number of bipartisan infrastructure bills in the government currently being processed, and hopefully that will benefit educational institutions when they're done with that process. Of course, the digital inclusion associations, I showed you one, but there are several that are championing the cause. Research and education networks, many states in the US have an R&E network. So what can you do as an educational institution to manage telecom? Think about the future, because we certainly are moving to a future of a digital society. And so how will that impact your programs and services to your students? I would like to introduce our first speaker to address some of the challenges that he's been dealing with at his institution and some of the solutions that he's found. And this is Kevin Brennan. He is the Director of Infrastructure Services at the University of Arts in Philadelphia.
We have a fairly large network for a small university. The network infrastructure sitting at the edge, which is where everybody connects, that's been in place since 2010. And every year we try to get the money, capital expenditure, or we look at some way to finagle it into OpEx. Prelude Solutions, because they've come in, we've done several engagements with us, and they have helped us cut costs and reduce services, time spent with vendors and other carriers that you just don't have time to spend during the day. And Prelude has come in and done that, and they've saved us significant money, and they've reduced costs, and they've removed unused services.
I'd like to introduce our next presenter. His name is John Suplee, and he's an innovative senior business and technology leader with multi-industry experience from startups through mid-sized companies, focusing on maximizing the value of information technology and delivering against business objectives and budgets.
I wanted to talk about a few things that we're seeing in the way technology has affected higher ed in the last few years in a major way. I mean, first, when we start with SaaS solutions, go back a few years and we were hosting everything ourselves on campus, which made a few things a little bit easier. We didn't have to worry about broadband connectivity. Do we have a redundancy in it, redundant firewalls, et cetera, as well as you didn't necessarily have students connecting in from the outside of campus all the time. But now, student information systems, learning management systems, and student success systems, majority of them are SaaS solutions. And we've all moved to that, reducing, our budget of maintaining these servers ourselves, because obviously, a lot of us, I like Kevin, have budget constraints. have a number of them and have had to live through this. So in dealing with that, the thing we look at is the importance of student connectivity. And it's not just we're finding on campus. You've got the dorms and the classrooms, but also off campus. And where do they get it off campus? Some get it at home. We found we had a large number of students that actually didn't have good broadband at home. So they, were going down to local libraries, or they were going down to a coffee shop. A couple found McDonald's that had Wi-Fi they could use. So we're looking at all these different things. And the reason a lot of this has changed, most of us have moved to hybrid classrooms where we have students, even now that we're back in class, we still have students that are at home. They don't want to come back to the dorms for whatever reason, or they don't want to, commute into campus. So we're providing things in multiple different ways nowadays. It's not the old brick and mortar, everybody comes to class, you learn, you go. And then we had a full separate system that maintained our online courses. Now everything's being blended together. So what we're even finding is even students that do come back, a lot of them want to sit in their dorm and attend class from there. They don't want to actually go to class. So it really becomes a lot more important of how the students look at this. Because if you really look at our current generation of students coming out of high school, to them, mobile technology is what we call it. They call it a cell phone. Their phone is a small computer. They don't look at it that way. That's their phone. And all the interactivity to it has nothing to do with the computer in their mind. It's my little phone. I carry my phone. I have that. So in looking at that, it really becomes more important as to what we're doing. Or do we have the correct broadband to interact with these students, to broadcast from a classroom out to our LMS or through Zoom, wherever, and then have it come back down to, wherever they're at. Are they at home, or are they in the dorm room? Or are they doing it on their phone? Because really, if you look at it, all of our current SaaS solutions, information systems, learning management systems, and success platforms, they all have phone apps. So you can very easily get everything you need to do right on your phone. And that's the way students are looking at it now. One of the things you have to look for when you're looking at all these different contracts, and normally, most people tend to sign a 3-year, but they're available 1, 2, 3, and 5 years, which I've usually seen. But one of the things you got to watch out for is there's auto renewal clauses in these contracts. Some of them are 60 days, 90 days. Others, you may have to tell them 120 days ahead of the renewal date that you want to get out of the contract. Some will go month to month. Some actually renew for full term. So you're running into a lot of problems with that. And you have to watch out what's going on with that. And people, for some reason, just kind of ignore that when you're signing it. The other thing that you can do is, as you read through these contracts, they're all negotiable. Even as small as the schools I've worked with are, we've been able to negotiate certain things out of the contract, like the auto renewal for 3 years. Now we got them to negotiate down, no, renew month to month. That way, if you are in the market to change and something happens and you aren't able to get it out and make that change fast enough to meet the end of your contract, you can just go month to month. A lot of times you may have to take a 60-day cancellation on it, so you may eat 2 months of costs, but you're not renewed and locked in for another 2-3 years, whatever the full contract was.
Joe is the director of IT at the Franklin Institute.
The Institute is amazing, but most people probably don't realize it was completely shut down for almost a year. And that destroyed the entire revenue stream, and we lost an enormous amount of talent. So I can completely identify with the challenges bringing talent in. More importantly, the biggest problem with talent is getting it, cultivating it. Of course, it's a very hot market right now. It's very difficult to get good people. And then the idea is being able to hold on to them and retain them. And so I can completely empathize with what everybody's going through. But I wanted quickly to talk about some of the things that I had come across. And I, too, am a big fan of services like Prelude. In the K-12 world, E-rate was a very big thing that brought telecom to the forefront. And it brought services to schools that weren't necessarily available. And then E-rate evolved over many, many years. And it went from simple voice, assisting with voice technologies to ultimately broadband and Wi-Fi. And then it moved into this category 2 space where you started talking about complete packaging. And that could be full services. And we found that it created a bit of a vacuum because it now made the voice technologies ever more important and the broadband technologies. And we realized very quickly that services that were outside of our expertise were going to be required to make sure we were optimizing everything we were doing and setting us up for the future. And we didn't have that talent in-house. So bringing in folks like a Prelude, for instance, they can help you because they're experts at what they do. And they can come in and say, we see what you're doing. We see where you're you're saving, you can save some money over here, but more importantly, they can set you up to succeed and have a path forward. To the point where it kind of goes to my second bullet, we decided that that was something that we needed to do on an ongoing basis. It wasn't enough just to do that once. We quickly realized that, again, John was talking about contract, right? And so those contracts come up anywhere from, whatever you said, the renewal periods are, typically it was 3 years for us. But every 3 years, we wanted to reevaluate, were we in the right place? Were we moving forward the right way? And because if you get it wrong, it can really set you back. And again, a nonprofit charity, for instance, really can't afford those. And we found, these types of solutions were extremely helpful. I would say too, in the beginning of the presentation, Carl, you were talking about COVID. Obviously, COVID affected all of us. We are all challenged with moving everybody remote. And again, I'm living in my bubble, thinking about my little world of the nonprofit small schools. And we were, I worked in the Camden area for quite some time, and, low income areas were very heavily impacted. John spoke to this a little bit about, students going to coffee shops and trying to, latch on the Wi-Fi. When, we quickly mobilized plans and found ways to get hardware into the hands of students and teachers and administrators, but then ran into the problem of, people that literally did not have internet connectivity. And this wasn't just students. It was, teachers. It was administrative people. And those were big challenges to work through. Now, I will say one thing that charities are really good at, whether we don't have all this technical expertise in-house, but we do have grant writers. Once we're able to identify opportunities and grants that we could apply for, we were able to get those types of things in motion. But there was something that we had to bridge. We had to get ourselves to a point where we are able to get those types of grant submittals moving. And again, there are organizations much like the Consortium that put resources in hand, these small organizations.
I want to thank our panel today. Everyone provided some great insight and input from their perspectives. We'll do a little bit more research on this and publish executive brief for anybody who would be interested in getting that. So we'll have a little bit more insight in there. We also want to thank our sponsor, Prelude.